What is up, Mullet Gang? It is your favorite neuro-edgy duo, ready to empower the fuck out of you.
Are you ready to break free from the chains of neurotypical expectations?
Hey guys, I'm Amy.
And I'm Susie.
And we're the Mullet Gang. Hey.
We are so excited with this episode that we just recorded. We got to interview one of our really good friends, Karrie. And boy, was she so authentic on there. Like, what an interview, right?
Fire. I think you and I both were just like so emotional after that because her story was so powerful and relatable, right?
Yeah, I mean, we really kind of like, this is what I love about what we're doing, because we really just went through that whole like, tell me about your ADHD story. And sometimes they're not as like, not everyone is going to have this like really telling story, but she definitely did. Like, she really opened up to us. And I found her story just so relatable, especially like feeling like, you know, you don't have the right tools, or people aren't believing you, and especially doctors like belittling you and stuff. Like, feels like you could be so defeated when you try to get help sometimes, right?
Yeah, I think for a lot of women, like getting that later in life diagnosis, that's relatable, right? Like maybe throughout their life, they've felt like something was off or they had the wrong treatment or diagnosis, but it takes a lot to finally like speak up and advocate for yourself and say, hey, I think this may be going on, or can we look into this? And then to be met with gaslighting and dismissiveness and invalidation. Gosh, does that feel shitty? And it's hard because many of us are people pleasers. So we'll just be like, okay, never mind, no worries. But like she shared, she was persistent. And even though maybe that caused a pause in her journey, she eventually went back and really advocated for a diagnosis and the right care.
But you know what? Don't hear it from us, hear it from her as we dive into this next episode.
Episode 10, Too Much, where Karrie shares in a very relatable and emotional way what it was like to be diagnosed later in life and that journey. This is part of our new series, ADHD and Thriving Women Unleashed. Let's hear it, ladies. And today we have a very special guest, Karrie, and we are so stoked to have her here and have her share her story about her own experience with ADHD, but also how she has created a business to help other women with a late diagnosis of ADHD. So we are so excited to dive on in and hear what y'all about.
I am so glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me to do this. I'm just really, really glad to be able to be here, share this story, and talk to the people.
Well, thank you for being on. I mean, we definitely are so excited to see and hear all these stories and how women have turned their diagnosis into a success, into their inspiration, into something that fuels them. I mean, for us, it's been like really huge. So thank you.
You're welcome. These stories, the stories that we tell women to woman, human to human, are the way that other women or other humans in general can figure these things out. Because those one-on-one conversations are the key. Like, I had two people in my DMs this week. One is like, I got diagnosed. And the other was like, I got the treatment. Finally, the doctor listened to me. And I'm just like, yes, this is why I do this shit. It's like, to hear those messages, because I definitely have my business, but I also educate, advocate, those types of things. And so it just, it's always a good feeling.
Yeah.
It's
right
so
on.
Powerful.
Yeah. Thanks.
So when did you get diagnosed? Let's start there.
March 6th, not that I know the date, 2022. So it's been a little over a year and a half.
Okay. Wow.
Or so. Yeah. But there's a backstory if you want to hear it.
Of course, we always want to hear the backstory.
Okay. So a few years back, I would say about 3, I really started notice. I think the first was a post that I saw that said I got diagnosed with ADHD at 47. And I was like, that's interesting. It didn't mean anything to me, but for some reason it captured my attention. So another friend of mine right around the same time got her ADHD diagnosis when she was 39, the day before she turned 40. And as I'm kind of starting to check out what the symptoms are of ADHD and figuring out they're different in women. They're not the same. What does that mean? And I went on to like Attitude Mag, like one of the top places that we can go for information. And I did a test on there that's like, do you think maybe you have it? Take these, every box. And there were things like I had been classic story here. I'd been diagnosed with anxiety and depression for 12 years and treated medically with medication for 12 years. And I noticed that there were other issues that didn't fall under that umbrella at all. I'm like, these do not fall under either of these. What are we allowed to swear here?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Profanity is encouraged.
The more profane, the better.
If you fucking want to, you fucking can.
Oh, fucking awesome. So I was like, what the fuck? Like, okay, this doesn't fit. And then I emailed my doctor and I said, hey, I'd like to be tested for ADHD. And I got a call back and he said, Miss Lemansky, that's what he calls me. Miss Lemansky, you don't have ADHD. You have anxiety. And we just have to get that under control. And in my brain, I'm thinking 12 years, we've been trying to get it under control. Many medications, we've been trying to get it under control. Still not there. Mm-hmm. But because I am a truster and he's got the white coat, what do I know? I went 14 more months before I asked again. And the more I read and the more I saw, I'm like, I know this is, I knew in my gut, I'm like, I know this to be true, but he's like the regional director and he's got to know all these things and blah, blah, blah. And finally, after 14 months, I'm like, no, like my life was really taking a shit. Like certain things were just not spiraling upward. Let's just say they were spiraling downward. And I was like, no, I'm going to ask for the scan. I asked for it. And then I got sent back and forth between two departments. Like you have to get a referral to go there. You have to get a referral from here. It's basically, they were saying the other person had to refer. And then about a week and a half after all of that, because I just stopped and let it sit there because I was so fucking frustrated. And my doorstep, I got mail with the forms. And I cried. I was like, oh my God. Oh, I have a referral and I can go in there and I drop this paperwork off and they're going to set me up with relief because I was like feeling like no one was listening to me, which again, this is not a rarity here. So then I filled out the paperwork immediately and took it in the next day. Got an appointment about 6 weeks later. And it was like a 90-minute session. There were things in my childhood, of course. We have to present in childhood in some capacity. And it was very clear with the things that I told him. He's like, yep. And then at the very end, he's like, well, you have ADHD and you have combined type. And I laughed. I'm like, of course I have both types in one. I'm an overachiever. That's what we do. Right? I'm like, hey, combined. And of course, a manifesting generator and ADHD. It's a lot. So I felt this relief. That was the first emotion, was relief, because I finally had the answer to the things I didn't understand. And I immediately loved myself because it was like, we live with this black box. You know how black boxes on airplanes, they don't know why the airplane went down until they get the black box. And then they open the black box. They're like, oh, here's what happened. I felt like I'd been handed my black box and I could open it and understand things that I thought were personality traits that were actually part of ADHD symptomology. And I was like, oh my God, I am not a fuck up. I'm not a loser, and I've been an entrepreneur since I was 24. I've had 2 6-figure successful businesses that I burned down because I would burn out. And I was like, why am I like this? Why am I like this? And finally I had all these answers. And so many women have said this phrase, but I will say it. Now my life finally made sense. How often do you guys hear that? So after getting that confirmation, it just changed everything because I knew immediately I wanted to try medication. I am not adverse to it. So I'm like, we're going to try this. And that was a surreal moment. Taking that first dose of medication was crazy because I'd taken it. And of course I forgot I took it. And then about 45 minutes went by. I'm sitting at this desk right here where I'm talking to you right now. And all of a sudden I literally looked up, like I was trying to look up into my own brain. I don't know why that seemed logical. And it was quiet.
Yes.
And I was like, do people wake up like this every day?
You're like, is this thing on? What happened? Testing?
Yeah. I was like, hello, you know, but it was this moment. It was a moment. I will never forget that moment, because when your brain is loud and yelling at you and it feels like a 10-ring circus, and then all of a sudden there's like, hush, it is a dramatic difference. And then I went through what I jokingly call my 4-month dark night of the soul, because after relief comes grief, comes anger, comes excitement for what's possible, and sadness and feeling not being listened to, angry at the medical system, angry here. Like I had all these emotions. And then of course I did what a lot of ADHD women do when they're diagnosed later in life. I want to tell everybody, I want to educate all these women because I know there's other people out there. So I wrote an entire ebook, basically with like anything that I had learned from vetted sources in one place, including links to websites, books, and stuff like that. And I created that. And now I realize that was kind of a labor of love and also a way for me to process it. And then you get kind of past that. I need to educate everybody. And then I was able to, because one of my first questions was, what do I do with my business now? My business was focused on women with anxiety. I was like, what the fuck am I going to do? Like that was one of my initial thoughts. But it ended up being, the diagnosis was the best thing that happened to me in my adult life, besides, of course, you know, having your kids and those things. But it was life altering, and it happened at 47 years old.
Wow.
So it was wild. It was a wild experience. And I do have a lot of it documented in my podcast, and, you know, the things that I have a specific episode where I talked about those 4 months, because I was still showing up on social media. I was still trying to like figure out how to navigate everything. And for some people, they get their diagnosis and they're like, I'm cool, I'm good. They just move along, but not all of us. And that was what I had experienced. So it was a long ass road. It's been over 3-something years since I suspected it, but the official diagnosis came, the treatment, then becoming aware of my own symptoms and understanding how those played into my life, and becoming very aware of, okay, now I know this, and that are the things that I have challenges with. How do I support myself there? And it just all made my life make so much more sense, and so much more capable in my work.
Wow. That's such a relatable story, I think, for so many women. And I love the fact that you were so persistent, because I hear this all the time, especially as a therapist, that these women are going to their doctors, their psychiatrists, their therapists, other professionals, and saying, hey, can we look into this? I'm thinking that we're missing an important piece. And there's this dismissiveness.
Yes.
Stop. I've even had clients tell me that their doctors would laugh in their face and say, are you kidding me? You don't have ADHD. You're not on the spectrum. You're not neurodivergent. You're just a mom with anxiety. You're just overwhelmed. Go do some more self-care. And imagine if you would have just accepted that and not really pushed through that and trusted that intuition, right?
Right. Plus, they slap us with mental health labels when it's a neurological condition that can have co-conditions, of course. Anxiety and depression being 2 signs of undiagnosed ADHD, right?
Yeah.
Literally, those are 2 things. There's a doctor I follow. She has ADHD, and she is a person who diagnoses ADHD. And she was straight up saying anxiety and depression are side effects of undiagnosed ADHD. And I was like, that makes so much sense, because my depression is gone. My anxiety is managed. I mean, it is different, like a different, like almost like a different person crawled into my body and was like, okay, I live here now. That's the only way to explain it.
That is, yeah.
Yeah, because you get that awareness and you understand you have a roommate in your head, and that you do have some power. It's not the CEO of who you are. It's parts of you. It's not all of you. And one of the best side effects of diagnosis is self-confidence, because my confidence has always been in the shitter, because, you know, there's this statistic now, obviously, how can they know this? But by the time we're 12 or 10, I'm 10. We get more negative messages than our neurodivergent counterparts. They say 20,000 messages by the time we're 10. But how do they know that exact number? I don't. But the point is of that, like the substance of it is we get all this negative messaging. We're not enough. We're not paying attention. We're too talkative. We're too this. We're too quiet down, get smaller, you know, and we just contort ourselves until we fit into a box and a good, you know, it's a chameleon. We become chameleons. I saw this one thing and it was like, oh, I really like your personality. And she's like, thanks, it's yours. That's exactly right. You will, of course you like my personality. I'm mirroring you. You like yourself. Like, hello, you know? So unmasking is just a brutal process at first because you don't know what parts are you, what parts are other people's voices. Like there's some work that goes into that. And thankfully I did therapy for about 4 months, once a week to truly like allow myself to process this fact. Because when you're told at 47 that that's going on and you just haven't known your whole life, it's a shock to the system, even if you're asking for it. Even if you ask for the diagnosis, I was still shocked somehow.
Yeah.
It's pretty funny.
It's different when you see that in writing and it's official, right? Like you can have suspicion and like you said, you can see different things and connect with it and relate to a lot of the symptoms. But when you actually have that confirmation, yes, this is your brain, this is what's going on. You experience so many different emotions.
Yes.
Like you said, initial kind of relief, but then you do go through the stages of grief and then you're trying to figure out how to unmask. And so it's a journey and everyone kind of navigates it differently, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. The unmasking part has been a process, especially since I'm a business owner, right? So I'm like, what happens now if I just show up all the way as myself? And it's not that I ever hid anything. It's that I thought because I'd been in business since I was 24, like wearing suits and all of that shit that I refuse to do now because comfort is queen, right? But all of these ways of looking and being that I thought I had to be, when I realized my knowledge is the key. Like, and I have a lot of it. So if you don't want to get into any of that because you don't like that I wear concert t-shirts or that's okay. I'm not for you, you know, but so many people who are spicy like us, they don't judge that because they get it, you know? So it's like, I'm not here to be a boss babe. You know, I'm here to be a badass boss bitch and really just let that personality come out, the silliness, the weirdness, you know. And the more I've done that, the more free I really feel. But it's really terrifying because when you've lived a certain way your whole adult life, and then all of a sudden you're like, okay, I'm going to set it free, unleash that shit. And some people are like, whoa, like I've never really sweared a ton in front of my mom. I know she doesn't like it. Mother-in-law, things like that. Now I'm like, I will not change who I am as a person in any circle where I used to do that. I'd be like, okay, I'm here. So I need to change this about myself here. I just stopped doing that shit. And that alone was liberating. People are like, wow, you swear a lot. I'm like, yeah. And I'm thinking, would they say that to a dude? Probably not. So you can fuck yourself and I'm going to talk how I normally speak. And, you know, I was such a people pleasing whore. Like I really would just people pleasing. That was like my forte. And now I'm like, okay, well, I'm sorry you don't like that, but that doesn't make it any less true, or that doesn't make it any less me. You know, so that's been challenging. You know, I have a non-neurodivergent husband. I had him listen to your episode with your partners because I felt that would be really good for him to hear too. It was such a good episode, ladies. Oh, it was so good.
Thank you.
And, you know, it's been difficult because he doesn't always understand why my brain works a certain way. And he'll be like, well, but that's not how things work. And I'll be like, said who? Like, show me the rule book. Like, where do you find this rule? Because I believe that it's like learn the rules and then break them, right? Like, no, you know, obviously, am I going to like do a string of swears in front of a 3-year-old? Probably not, because I'm a parent. But if it's not in front of like kids, I'm going to be myself. I'm not going to do that anymore. And that has been so freeing. And it is a work in progress, though. I mean, it is time. It is mindset work to the nth. And like I said, 4 months of therapy in the beginning was probably a huge factor of why I've been able to get to where I am now more quickly than maybe some others do in this process.
I think that comes across a lot on your social media and your work. Like, that was the one thing I really connected with you when we first started following each other. I looked over your page and I was like, you really get what it is to get that late diagnosis.
Oh,
and
yeah.
you really get what it is to be kind of fucked by the system, especially the medical system. I mean, I have trauma, and you know what? Let's just call it what it is. It's trauma. You have trauma. You have some serious trauma with that because of the fact that whenever you have a medical professional, therapist, teacher, somebody in that position of power tell you that your thoughts are not true, that you're wrong about your own body, your own mind, your own whatever, it just fucks with you. And it could set you up for so much failure. And the fact that you were persistent, I mean, that's crazy. It's so empowering. And this is exactly why I love this segment that we're doing, because it's we don't get to hear those voices a lot.
Yeah.
There's a stigma with ADHD. There's a stigma with autism. There's a stigma with all of anything mental health is a stigma, let's be honest. But whenever people can just talk about it openly and share their story, I think that's it was really hard not to get emotional right now when you were talking, because I was like, yeah, dude, I feel you on all of that. All of it,
Yeah.
It's tale as old as time is we hear it all the time.
Yeah. And I've spoken with hundreds of women at this point, whether they've been clients or not. And the story is the same. It's I almost laugh because I know the narrative. I know what's coming. I know a couple of things they're going to say. Literally know a couple of statements that are most likely going to come out of their mouth. And then when they say it, I'm all,
goosebumps, right? You hear that shared experience. It's so powerful. You almost have this you're reaction because you're I get you. I'm with you. I feel you.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. And the only difference between you and me is I'm further down the path. That's it. That is it. Because I really see there's 3 different, very distinct things that I notice when people are diagnosed as adults. The first is kind of that shock and those feelings that come up and not understanding why they're having grief, not understanding why they have anger, not understanding those feelings. And, kind of looking into their diagnosis at first and then getting that diagnosis and then having that. Then the second part is you want to tell everyone around you. You want to tell every woman, you want to speak about it all the time. I created a separate Instagram. I'm going to educate every single person on the whole face of this planet so that women like me can fight, and then I would say probably within a year to 2 years, this is what I've seen, is that then we stabilize and go, okay, now I understand my brain. Now I understand how the fuck I work. Now I understand what I'm capable of. And I've never been a person to take no for an answer. I've never been a person to let roadblocks get in my way. Like I said, I've owned 2 other businesses besides the one I own. And those were both before I was diagnosed. And this business I have now, I was diagnosed in the middle of it.
Wow.
It was wild. It was wild trying to be okay, how does this all work? It was crazy, but you do get to that point finally where you have more the sediment has settled. When you have water and mud and you shake it up and everything's muddy. And then finally the sediment is at the bottom and you can see so clearly. We hit that point. And that is the best fucking part.
Ooh, that's magic.
Best part, because you realize that I just got chills. Your diagnosis is one of the best things to happen to your life because it affects DSM, 2 or more areas of your life, right? And you're oh, that's why this affects my job and my marriage and my parenting and my, and then you go, okay, now I'm going to get to know me. Not the voices in my mind that are everybody else's, but what parts of that is me. That's unmasking. Unmasking is uprooting the things in your brain that are not your voices. The things that have dug way deep down, my favorite story I tell, and I'm still looking for this report card because I know I have it somewhere. When I was in second grade, I had a teacher write, if Karrie doesn't stop talking so much, she's never going to have any friends.
Oh my God. I had the same report card.
Yes. And then I found it at 19. And read it and took on that belief for decades.
Oh,
If I don't shrink, if I don't become smaller, if I don't tame it down or tone it down, I'm never going to have any friends. And that was like fucking brutal at 19. And I just believed it because that had kind of been what had been playing out in my life in my teenage years. And, you know, that recording played over and over again. And that's one of the most powerful pieces of my entire story, is because when that was written about you and then you see it at a later time in your life where you can comprehend it, and then you take that on and like you said, it fucks with you. Mm-hmm. And so knowing that she didn't know shit, she was doing the best she could. Why the fuck she wrote that on a second grader's report card is beyond me. But, you know, it was also the time of the times. They told my mom, they thought that I was, how do I put it? That my brain, that I was needing additional help, like that I was not smart and that I was slow. And then they tested me. And they're like, bitch, she gifted and she off the chart. So my mom even changed schools for me because I was put, of course, like a lot of us, into the gifted class, you know? And so it just reading that and internalizing it and then realize how many other things, like I had this was another one of my favorites. I had a boss who was male. And he sat me down one time and I worked in a gym. I was a CrossFit level 1 trainer. I fucking loved it. So much fun. I love lifting heavy shit. It's like the bomb. And he sat down with me one day. We were just chatting and he's like, people think you're fake because you're so happy all the time. And in my mind, I'm like, you run a business and what do you want me to get up in front of the class and be a dick? Okay. Like, is that your expectation? Because I'm kind, that makes me fake. Like it was I was like, and I internalized that. I'm like, okay, well, you know, less niceness, less kindness, less big-hearted. We're intuitive. We take in everything. We can read people's energy. We can read the energy of a room. And we just disregard our intuition. Repeatedly because of things that get said to us where we're like, oh, shrink a little more. Okay,
that becomes your narrative, right? Like that's the story that you've been told and that's the story that you're telling yourself. And so you start to see the evidence to prove that. And it can even become like a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's like, oh, I can't maintain friendships. Oh, I can't be successful here. I can't do this. And until you realize that story and start to change it, it does feel like you're in a never-ending feedback loop, right?
Right. And then when you learned about your reticular activation system, you know, when you learn about that part of your brain that, you know, what you think is true in the world, your brain's going to give you evidence, right? So basically, if you're a cup half full person and my life is a shit show, your brain's going to be like, okay, we're only going to let in the shit show stuff. None of the good shit's coming in. Got it. Because we're processing millions of pieces of information. And so our brain's like, okay, we'll take this shit show piece and this shit. But then you have people who are like glass half full or understand that glasses are refillable, right?
Yes.
And you see life through that perspective and not in a Pollyanna fake bullshit kind of way, but like, no, this is really how I see the world. It gives you evidence of that. And so now it's like that evidence is everywhere.